You have lived with this character for like over a decade. And within that, there's so many life milestones you go through. And your life has changed so much in that time. So let's take it back to the beginning when you first auditioned for Downton Abbey. Who were you? Where were you? Walk us through that space in your
Okay,
life.
sure. So I was 26 and I got the call to audition for this role, Lady Mary in Downton Abbey. I was living with 3 other girls in a big house. It felt like a student house. I remember getting the audition and thinking, this is a big one. You know, Gillian Fellows had written it. Hugh Bonneville was already attached, Maggie Smith, you know, the writer of the Oscar-winning Gosford Park and all of that. I mean, it felt like a big deal. And, you know, at the time I was auditioning for lots of other parts and wasn't getting certain parts that I perhaps wanted at the time. And so I went into it thinking, okay, I'm just going to give this my best shot. And I remember being really conscious of doing it and then letting it go and not hanging on to it for too long, because I was, you know, anticipating disappointment, you know, so sort of preparing myself for that. And I remember getting the call, you know, when I look back, it was life-changing in that moment. That was the moment it happened. And then we never would have dreamed it would become the phenomenon the show has come, and that 12 years later I'd be sat here and we'd still be talking about it. Because you feel that, you know, when you're doing something, you really hope that it's the audience out there loves it, and all the hard work pays off. You know, it's obviously really rewarding when something is received well, but you don't expect it necessarily to go international, you know. And it's such a universally loved show, and I feel like when it hit America, that was when things really started to get crazy. Because it had already been quite a lot in the UK. You know, there was a lot of noise around it, and we were on the covers of all the papers, you know, the first episode, after the first or second episode had aired. So, and then suddenly we were being recognized, and that was, you know, that was obviously a real change. You know, I feel like I live much more presently in it now. I can kind of take it in a bit more. When I was younger, it was just all like a bit of a blur.
If you could go back to that you who was sat in your room, who won that audition, got the part, what would you want to say to her if you could sit down next to her now?
I'd sit down next to her and say, Michelle, it's all right. You're gonna get that job. I'd really sort of worked a lot in theatre, and then was beginning to do a bit more in television, but not, you know, I hadn't got that main role yet. And so, you know, I would say to myself, hang in there. It's just around the corner.
And now you're literally 6 seasons in, you're 1 movie in, another literally just about to drop. And I think aside from the escapism that Downton Abbey gives us, it gives us some really poignant moments as well. And especially in the new movie, I love the sweet part where Lord Grantham says to Mary, you're the captain now. And she's really now coming to this point in her life where she's stepping into her power. And this is what this podcast is all about, those moments where you step into your power. Yeah. When do you feel like you stepped into your power in your own life?
I mean, I think that something like Downton certainly gave me a lot of confidence, and I think that also came from the character, you know, because she is such a strong and, you know, just a fantastic character to play, and there is a sort of air of confidence that those, you know, women of that time had, and I think that certainly helped me to feel more powerful, definitely, and within my career, because, you know, once you've been established, you know, as a certain character in a successful show, that of course gives you, you know, a great feeling, and a feeling of strength and stability within a career that is quite, you know, it's quite unpredictable. You know, you can sort of never know where it's going to go, and I feel very lucky that Downton sort of gave me that sort of anchoring from a very young age, really. I mean, I was 27, so I felt definitely that time kind of felt like I was sort of, as you say, the show is about stepping into my power.
I love that. And it's so great to actually get to a point in your life where you actually can be like, do you know what? I'm actually in my power now. And I actually feel empowered within myself, right? Because I think all the time, if you're always looking for external sources to empower you, it's got to be that relationship inside as well, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think age, of course, it comes with age, doesn't it? I mean, I loved turning 40. It was, I felt like it was, up on the 4th floor. It's quite a nice view.
I think there's something about Lady Mary as well, in which relates so nicely to that, is that I feel like from the beginning right the way to where we are now in the second movie, she does go on this journey of discovering a love for herself, because she operates from quite a lot of self-hatred at different parts, especially at the beginning. And I think that is something that so many people can relate to, because I think everyone goes on this very weird journey with themselves, where they go from sort of like hating themselves to loving themselves, and then sort of trying to discover that part of self-love and how powerful that can be. How do you think your journey with that has been?
I think that's a really good observation of Mary. I think she, when I think of her in the early years when she was younger, and she's sort of that age where you're kind of, you think you know what you want, you think what you want. I think I can relate to that. At that age, you think you want certain things, and when I look back, I think, gosh, those decisions, I thought I knew what I was doing. I thought I was mature, and I sort of recognized that in Mary a bit. And then, as I've sort of grown up with the character, I feel like there is a sort of much more settled feeling with her and with myself.
Well, Mr. Talbot, you have swept me off my feet.
I promise you won't be sorry.
I better not be.
You've already touched on Anatomy of a Scandal, and I mean, what an amazing show. If I feel like I would need you as a barrister in my life, if ever I got in trouble, I'd be like, let's get her in. You're so good in it. Like, how did you master that legal jargon? Walk me through that legal schooling, because when I watched it, I was like, she is literally this badass barrister, and it's like the thing I needed the most in my life at that point. I was like, yes, living for this power on screen.
Yeah, she's a fantastic character, and that show was just, I loved it the minute I read the script. And I think it's it's a really important issue. Consent is something that isn't, people aren't aware of it, and I think it creates conversation, that show. And in order to become the QC that she is, and it takes a lot to get where she's at in that profession, and coming from a working class background, that must have been very difficult for her as Holly. That environment, for a woman to be at the top of her game in that profession is still quite rare, and both her and Angela, Josette Simon, who's played by Josette Simon, they both have this sort of unconscious bond, I think, because they are both women who took, it took a lot for them to get where they are. And so when she's given this case, it's huge, and she sort of goes into it slightly blindly, but knowing deep down, this isn't this she could lose her job, because she's prosecuting someone that she knows, and not only someone she knows, but someone who has assaulted her. And in order to get into the mindset of the barrister, I worked really closely with a top QC in the UK, who was basically my coach, and she really helped Josette Simon and I with all of the kind of, ways in which you sort of attack a cross-examination. And she was wonderful, because we would just sort of do Zooms together like this. And she would play me and I would play other characters, and then I'd sort of hear her way of saying certain questions and her intonation and how she sort of executed each line. And it was vital, in order to play this sort of role. I had to really, it's one of the hardest roles I've ever had to play, really.
It really comes through like how powerful that performance is. And I just think it just literally hits you like a wrecking ball, like your performance, and it's just so great. And you must have had so many powerful conversations during the research process for this show as well, because when we had Naomi Scott on, she talked very powerfully about the research she did in and how it affected her performance, and how the kind of story she had, especially from working with a female barrister as well, right?
You know, all of us, you know, the creatives, the actors, everybody, we were so, you know, so passionate about making this as authentic as possible, and it being, you know, truthful, you know, to the people out there who may have experienced something like Naomi's character or my character. And we worked really closely with a charity called Women's Aid, who I'd love to say in this podcast, just because I think it's really important that people are aware of Women's Aid, because, you know, if somebody has been through something and they don't know what to do, whether that be to, you know, approach the police straight away, or they want to sort of clarify what has happened, because, you know, that's what the show is, you know, essentially it's about consent. And Naomi was amazing. You know, she, like, you could sort of hear a pin drop when she entered that room, in the courtroom. And I actually hadn't met her before that moment, because Gisette and I had been doing a scene, and then Naomi walked into we just started a rehearsal. And I'm not sure whether that was set up by SJ or not, I don't know, but she was quite isolated, you know, Naomi at first. And she walked into the dock, and you could hear a pin drop. It was so, you know, I mean, to imagine, and I'm just speaking for Naomi, but to, you know, to imagine what it felt so nerve-wracking for her as an actress. You know, she was saying, I can't imagine what that must feel like for somebody who is actually going through it in real life.